Ugh, okay, this isn't, something's not right.
Oh.
Angie said it still says waiting for, wait. Ah, hi Benji. Okay, can you hear us okay? Let me get the chat live here. Yes, Felix said he can hear us. Okay, Felix, thank you so much. You can tell we have no idea what we're doing here. Welcome everybody to this awesome webinar. I'm super excited here today to be joined by Liz Redegg and James Farley, who are going to walk us through some of the amazing tools that they've built here using AI to help them with their Kanban implementations. So I'm really excited. I'm going to let them take center stage here. So we're going to kick things off with James, and then he'll hand it over to Liz, and they're going to do a demo for everyone of what they've built, how they're using it, and how it's helping them in their Kanban with their teams. So without further ado, James, you want to kick us off?
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm sharing my Agentic Kanban blueprint, and it's free. It's packed with gold. At least I hope it is, and it's proven. I've been using it in production, and I can almost guarantee that not one of you will read it. And that's because you'll more than likely, if you've been experimenting with AI, you'll point an agent at it and you'll ask them to do it for you, because that's a great thing that AI is pretty phenomenal at, right? And actually, I've designed for that in this resource. So tell your agents to go and read it. I'll give the link to the GitHub repository, and I'll even provide you a prompt. I'll provide you 2 prompts. One, if you've already been experimenting with AI, and another one if you're essentially starting from zero, because you don't need to start from zero. You don't need to learn all the lessons all over again. So that's it, right? That's the shortest keynote in the world. Well, I mean, that'd be a bit rubbish, wouldn't it? So in seriousness, I don't know what level people might be at, whether people have just experimented with ChatGPT and Gemini. I don't know, maybe you can let us know if you have already used Claude Code. Maybe there's specific insights that you're hoping to be able to get, so you can let us know. Any of those, I won't read as I'm showing you some stuff, but I will have a little read when Liz is covering off her interesting stuff as well, and see what I can provide separately. But those 2 things that I was talking about there, the ChatGPT type stuff of the world, that's generative AI, and the Claude Codes of the world are agentic AI. And the difference between those is that generative will take your input and just give you an output, and then you decide what you're going to do with it. Agentic AI is keen to follow through. It doesn't just write code, it runs it. It doesn't just describe how you could clear your inbox. It can do it for you, delete stuff. It executes. It doesn't just sketch out a product specification. It builds one and can test it. But the thing about the last part is it doesn't necessarily test for what you wanted. It tests for what it built. And that's a different story. And it's that makes the operating environment that you're building around you so critically important. So a bit of a confession, this Agentic Kanban blueprint isn't strictly a blueprint. It's not something that you install. You don't even need to install to take. You don't need to lift all of it. It's more a collection of architectural practices, procedures, lessons learned, and genericized patterns that I've proven to be able to transform agentic working from an environment where your agents need to be told what to do every step. And instead, they can become something closer to colleagues. So they can hold context. They can understand your operating model. They can look at a board and understand what's in flight and what's aging and prioritize work based on those factors. What's waiting for capacity before it's going to get pulled, and make good decisions about what it should do next without being told. The difference is nothing to do with the model that you're using. It's entirely to do with the operating environment that you build around it. And that is what AKB is. That's what the Agentic Kanban blueprint is. It's an operating environment for agentic AI that's grounded in pro-Kanban principles. So flow thinking, capacity signaling, human in the loop as a prioritization, using WIP as signal. But it's much more than that, because ultimately doing Kanban better isn't the thing that delivers value. It's really about trying to help the system be honest about while you're trying to actually execute and deliver value. So if there were just 3 things to take away from my bit, and maybe if your agent only had 5 minutes to read it, do a cursory glance, the top three things worth highlighting are that the board itself isn't a management tool. It is memory. It functions as memory. The agents will have their own memory, and they even got shared memory, but the board is the primary single source of truth and memory, not a file. We might create files to come up with designs and options, but the work that's in the board essentially becomes memory for what it is that's going to be required, the specification, if you like, for it. And when an agent starts a session, when you launch it, it goes through some startup routines, and the priority one before it starts working will be to read the board, read the state, find out what's in flight, what's aging. And that information persists between sessions. It persists between agents and between context resets, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So the board itself is the thing that makes these stateless AI processes behave more like a coherent team over time. And that is the foundational idea, and everything else builds on that. Second of those 3 is that autonomy is a dial rather than a switch. I want to show you that I'm starting from a blank-ish screen, just some agents that haven't been booted up. And you'll see that I have bypassing permissions on. They've had to earn their way to get more autonomy through the rules and mechanics that I've put in place. But it is a dial, so you would start without that YOLO permissions. And the blueprint does include graduated autonomy. So it's not agents can just do anything and don't ask permission. But ultimately, you will become the blocker for stuff that's in the system, and you'll be trying to find ways of reducing that. Trying to ease the pressure on the human that's in the loop. But ultimately, if you are in a position where you're working on client-sensitive stuff or in a regulated environment and you're interested in this stuff, that really is a part that you shouldn't skip. Graduated autonomy. Number 3. There's a document that's in this repository called Mistakes We Made. And it's really an honest log of failure modes from production use. And that includes elements like agents reverting each other's work in concurrent sessions, knowledge systems that were just filling with noise, making it not especially valuable, autonomy creeping past its boundaries, and every one of those have taken me months, and they don't need to take everybody months to be able to discover and cater for, because the blueprint hands them to you from day one with solutions that you can build in. Beyond those 3, the blueprint also covers agent personas, so defining distinct roles and things that inform decision authority. It proposes a three amigos checkpoint that runs between the orchestrator, a quality guardian, and the human as product owner as a checkpoint before delivery starts. And there's also a knowledge system which tracks confidence explicitly. And there are security hooks to enforce rules mechanically rather than just relying on agents reading and remembering or choosing to follow those policies. And as well, there's a session closing ritual, much more like a retrospective that we would have after every session, not just every fortnight. And on that last one, the session close stuff, it's not glamorous, but for anybody that is juggling multiple things and projects and trying to create and curate ideas, living in a world where your agents are forgetting between sessions, it probably is worth more than any individual technical feature that's in the repo. So one thing that's worth me being direct about is that the board matters. So in this system, the board isn't a reporting tool, it's the agent's memory between the sessions. And I run this on Business Map. There's a link and a trial in the README. You can adapt these patterns to other tools. And the README is honest about that. And I think the thing that made the choice here much easier for me is the push-based agent communication that you'll see. It relies specifically on comment event business rules. And so I tested Trello, Linear, GitHub, Jira, and ADO. None of those actually support this. But the whole system, Claude Code, Business Map, GitHub, you can genuinely experiment with it for free before you actually committed to anything if you wanted to. That's all set out. Let me show you some stuff. I'm only going to share this screen briefly because it's to show you that I'm starting from essentially blank. I haven't pre-programmed the agents to do anything, and I'm just going to hit them with a startup routine. When I say a start, it doesn't need to be anything. I could just say go. So I'm waking these things up. And that is about all I'm going to do on that screen. So while I'm changing screens, you can see that they're doing stuff. The keen-eyed among you will see that they're reading files as they start up. If I switch some things over. I can quickly orient you around this business map tool. I really don't want you to get lost in the data. I mean, I do not have a sandbox or a demo environment that I'm planning to do this demo from. What we're going to work with is my actual system. So there's no like fake stuff going on. What the agents will be doing is picking up work and moving on. But I've clogged up the system, actually. I did this thing. I should have done a bit of admin. Sorry about those. I genuinely need to look at these. So I'll move those in a validation rework. And everything else I'm going to clear out so that you can see what happens within our session. Then I'll orient you. I just archive all of those. So you've got two layers here. The top one is initiatives, and that's where I spend most of my time and attention. The bottom one is cards, and that's where the work is done. The initiatives inform the cards, but I don't really want you to get worried about the data too much. I'm going to use that. So it's the same view, but all you can see is dots. Because you don't need to see the information that's within them. And then I'm going to minimize some of these columns because you're not going to be interested in the backlog. Oh, you might be interested in the inbox, actually. But I'll minimize some of these. So we've got some work which is coming through into Ship Live. Obviously, there was some housekeeping that didn't get done. And what we should see. So yeah, some of them were prompting me. Basically, there was some continuous integration and monitoring failures last night, which is what came through. So one of them did stop just to ask me if I needed to do anything, but the orchestrator had caught them and has taken some action. What I might do, because it's taken some of them a little while to actually start. A lot of, if I could show you the other screen, if I could show them both at the same time, you'll see that there's a lot of reading that's going on. One of them's telling me that there's 0% coverage going on in a new store. One's told me that there's 3 open actions from the last session. I'm just going to say go. So I've designed in some things, right? It's not perfect. There's still a technical tool limitation where they will constantly. There's more than I would like of asking permission to do stuff. And what I've been discovering in the past week has been how to make better use of some of the hooks and pre-compaction and some silent mechanics that you can actually inject, say, keep work flowing. But the way that I've implemented it means that it's every like 20 or 25 tools. So the agents will start, read the board, and decide what they're going to work on that relates to those priorities. I should probably bring some other stuff through. Bring that in. One thing I might do is to save a bit of time later on. Find the one I'm looking for. Might have just seen some changes here. So that was another signal for work going in progress.
And James, one question Carolyn asked here is, what is a session?
Oh, I'm very sorry. I'm glad you asked. So when I say session, what I mean is essentially a chat instance. So Claude Code cannot operate outside of one of these sessions. So what that is I've opened up this thing that looks like command line. It's just a terminal, and that is how I've started my Claude Code. So I've just had to go to the directory where that tool exists, launch it, and then we could just have a conversation. You don't need a board to get Claude Code to do stuff for you. You can just type it out in a prompt here the same way as you would in ChatGPT. I'm currently running a live presentation. You're on camera. Do you want to say hi? So it's just the agent is just doing stuff, but I instead of point at this stuff is that I don't need to use the prompts to continually do this. It'll be the work is, it originates from the board. I'll probably have a key point to make on that as well after.
And James, maybe you could share a little bit with our audience too while you're pulling this up here. What Obviously you're augmenting a lot of what Business Map has available, just looking at the board. What were the things that you were trying to add here that you couldn't do in Business Map directly or couldn't see in Business Map directly?
Sorry, hit me. What the extra things that I've had to do that weren't native out of the box?
Or what problem were you trying to solve here by adding
Oh
this?
yeah, well, it wasn't a business map specifically. What I was trying to do is, AI is a hot topic, and I'm interested in Kanban, and I wanted to know what kind of synergies they may have. So how could I potentially implement and introduce and improve a agentic Kanban system? But I didn't strictly set out to just do that. It's as a business owner, I have product needs and goals. And so I wanted to experiment with it kind of a bit more practically that way and actually build and develop some proof of concepts for myself and my business. And so it was an evolution of that, really. It was analysis of boards that would work well in that kind of environment, support both human looking at this for visibility and agent actively taking action without needing my input specifically. And by that, what I mean is APIs. So having an application interface for the computers to be able to talk to other computers. But the bits that I've had to improve on were mechanisms like what I just did was I went into a work item and I wrote a comment that said, "Can we have a 3 amigos?" Then some inbox items got created here, and that has been a trigger for 2 of the agents.
And you've got a question here from Rajarashi. What work is the agent actually doing on each card?
So the agents that it depends. Right? There's different projects that are in flight, and each one of these is what the different colors relate to. Actually, the different colors represent different projects. Without me having to go into depth on those, the only 2 of the agents, in addition to me, have shared context of everything that's going on within the system. All other agents, and there are currently like 13 different project agents that I have for different things, I've specifically contained their context within their own. So there is no need for project A to talk to project B because they're completely independent. But I do have these roles that will help make sure that the architecture is sound across them, that we are asking good questions before, much the same way as you would expect a team to genuinely operate with each other, but it's just me and a load of robots.
And one more question for you, James. Can we use these agents to connect with other ALM tools like ADO or Jira? I know you said you hadn't tested it with any of those yet, but would your blueprint be able to run against those?
I would love to find out how successful people are with them. My analysis, which I'm not going to bring up here, but in the GitHub repository, I have put in there in the it might be in tools that I put it in, but also I've done a blog post which is choosing your board to specifically analyze the pros and cons of the different boards. And Business Map just comes out considerably above some of the others. So I've ended up losing track of where I was, and I wanted to show you some of the agents talking to each other, which is probably one of the more interesting things. This is the one I kicked it off on, right? Oh, luck of a demo. And I won't fall back to a video either because I can see that that's 20 minutes in. But what I've been able to orchestrate here was having multiple agents. In Claude Code specifically, the agents aren't natively able to talk to each other. There is no, I'm saying there's no mechanism for them to do this, but then I built it. The agents in one session, one instance, one chat environment, this agent cannot directly talk to this agent, doesn't know if it's there, they have no awareness of each other's presence. but the use of this board means that they can actually just directly talk with each other about a particular problem, and I don't even need to be in the loop, but I am.
Cool.
So yeah, there's definitely some cool stuff, but I don't want to eat up into this time, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, one more question for you, James, before we move off. Sade asked, can you quantify the time efficiency?
It depends on your gate. So how I'm going to take this question is how much time I've put into building this blueprint, but it might be how much time does this save for people actually using it. So the first one, I've hyper focused on it. It has sunk so much of my time doing it, but it's been an awesome learning experience. I didn't set out to create the Agentic Kanban blueprint. It was just I got to create some amazing stuff, and I was like, yeah, I should probably share some of this. And so that's what I've done there. And I haven't quantified that time, but my wife would tell you it's a lot. And the latter, how much time does that save on the teams? Well, what I'm sharing here is not a product. It isn't a thing that you would buy that means you have business map and you're working. I'm trying to find my screen so I can actually look at people again. Am I still sharing?
No, it's just your video.
No. Why can't I see your face? There we go. So yeah, it's not a product that you would install or buy. It's a thing that you genuinely just point your agents at and say, what in here is useful for my system? Even if you're starting from zero, I'm interested in exploring agentic AI, and here's some problems I want to solve. Here's a repository. What can I use? And so it is just a collection of tools that you could then start. If you want to use Jira, you can use Jira and apply these patterns. And what it'll offer is the files, routines, hooks, things that you may find of interest, and you would rely on your agent to help you understand what things are worth experimenting with and what you just drop. There are some things I'm doing that you just may not be interested in. And that's the beauty of this thing. It's not a thing that you just open up and start using. It's a thing that you can read through, decide what's relevant, and then just rip it out, and take it out and twist it. Perhaps you do want, let's say, test-driven development, but you don't want it in the way that I've designed it with having a test specialist. Maybe you want to design your roles so that every one of them has a specific test bit of functionality. But one of the key things I've been trying to fight with designing this stuff is context windows and compaction. And so if I could just talk about that pretty quickly, it's that what a lot of people don't necessarily realize when you're having conversations with agentic or generative AI is I think people have an impression that you write a message and then the thing does something, and then when you write it, and it's always the latest thing that gets processed, and that's not the case. It's actually all of the previous information. So every time you're adding a new message, the agent is actually reprocessing all of that information again and again. But it can't do that forever. So every so often, it takes that information and it compacts it. So what might take up 3 pages instead, the way that a agent would remember that is by compacting it down into just a series of bullets. But you and the agent themselves do not have control over what gets saved. It just happens automatically, and then you keep going with that session. So that can cause problems where I don't know if you've ever talked to an agent and then thought that they've got amnesia because you've just mentioned something, you've talked through something else, and they, how can this really clever thing have forgotten about this file that I've just shared with it and it said that it's read? It's compaction that you're fighting. So the Kanban blueprint is beyond just the Kanban stuff, and it's actually helping you fight a load of those challenges as well in the way that you architect around this stuff. But really, I should probably stop there. There are some blog posts and things that I've done to accompany this, and I'll throw out a series of links to those as well. And I just hope it's helpful. And even if it isn't helpful, I would love to know what those struggles were, and then perhaps I can adapt and evolve the blueprint. It looks completely different today than it did last week. It is always evolving, just as AI is.
One more question for you, James, and it looks like Benji's been sharing some of the links to the GitHub repository as well as the blog post about it here in the notes.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll make sure those are all added to the YouTube recording of this as well, so that if you don't capture them here, you can find them later. We've got one more question for you though. How do you make the trade-off between token cost and efficiency?
One way is that my project agents use a medium tier, and the two agents that are working cross stream use the premium kind of models that are available. I keep track of my usage, and I might take that up or down. And I do pay attention to if something can just be done in a basic model, then I'll use that. But generally, my project agents are just always running, and I don't tend to scale up or scale down their model. I just keep them on the medium tier, and there's one of the interesting things is a pre-compaction hook. I have it detect when a compaction event is going to happen. Then it will take a snapshot of that whole, all of that instance. And then you go into the next session and you still have a snapshot of that information. So you don't lose it with compaction. But then when you go through the next compaction, that snapshot's replaced. So there are these fairly simple things that are in place, but I've felt the benefit of being used, and they make it so that I'm comfortable using this thing called Sonnet rather than Opus. And one thing I will say is, if you're going to the effort of trying to build a truly autonomous agentic system, don't bother with some of the basic frameworks like the models like Haiku. They have a place, but I can't remember if I've hit publish on another blog post, but from fresh context, I've asked one agent in Haiku something and then just demonstrated the difference between that and Sonnet, and it is stark. Like false positive stuff. But tell me where your session ID is. I don't have that access to that information. Multiple iterations before it eventually goes, okay, yes, I do, here you go. Versus one of the more advanced models. Anybody that really does want to talk a bit more about those different types of selection and stuff, then just hit me up. I can nerd out about all this stuff all day.
Amazing, James. Thank you. Well, let's kick it over to Liz. Liz, I think you've got some stuff you want to show off too, and a slightly different angle here on what problem you were trying to solve for. So maybe we can start a little bit more with why you built this and what you were missing from the ecosystem you were working in. 1 second here.
All right, thanks, Finn. You can see me. All right. So, so what I'm doing is just a slight bit different, I will say, from James. So, I currently have a client, right, that is spinning up an agentic framework, and they also want to implement Kanban, right? And we know the struggles of implementing Kanban anywhere where you have to have a lot of information available for people, and they have to know how to look at metrics and then when they should be paying attention to their workflows. And I think that injecting AI into that, it makes it a little difficult without putting guardrails and information into that AI, because we know AI will make up whatever it wants, right? It's going to use the most popular words that it sees. And so ultimately you fall into, oh, we're doing Scrum, and that's not what we want to do. So my main problem is, how do I inject a Kanban into this agentic framework that we're putting in place at the organization I'm at? And you over to the other screen here, Colleen. So I'm going to share, maybe I have, mine is more going to show you what I've created and less of the technical background, because I'm not a technical person, but I've done a whole lot of technical things with the Agentic framework that has been put in place. So a framework, just to give a little background, because even a couple months ago, I didn't really understand what a framework is. And I will say that, do I even completely understand it now? Maybe not, but I learn every day using it and asking questions about it to Claude. So a framework is basically like a brain that you put in place that everybody uses at one organization. And the great thing about that is it gives everybody sort of the same snapshot that they're looking at and asking questions to. So if we had just went in and said, hey, everybody go use Claude and try to do your work without a framework in place, everybody would get different answers all the time. With a framework in place, it gives sort of some basic information about the organization. It gives, details about how we work. And then when we go in and try to do perhaps the same type of work, we get similar answers, right? It might not be exactly the same, but we're going to get the same outcomes, hopefully within reason. Underneath the hood of the framework are basically four things. Skills, right? These are things that we go in and it has all the knowledge and information about an activity that Claude session or whatever it needs to use to do the work that we're doing. There's also agents, right? These are the things that are in there running. I know James talked a lot about agents, right? These are the things that are in there sort of running the work, right? Going and creating the answers we need. They use skills. You can have multiple agents running at the same time doing work like at the same time that maybe it would have been multiple different people doing previously. We also have commands, right? The things we tell Claude to do, which I will show you a few that I've created. And then we have hooks, right? These are the things that are the guardrails that it will, stop us from doing bad things. When you have Claude, there are things that Anthropic has already created right here. But when we put a framework in place, we are also creating skills and agents and commands and hooks that fit the work we're doing and the way we want to work. So it's not generic. It's really specialized based on your organization or the way you want to work, the tools you're using. At the organization I'm at, basically the framework sets a specific path for how we do work. And so it goes through a pipeline of steps. This is sort of the generic pipeline. I didn't want to go through all the steps, but basically what happens is we go in, every person does it this way. We define what the problem is, get a root cause, we take it through a step to specify, we create specs, find out really what we need to do. Then we check that, make a plan, check that plan, make sure that everything looks good. And then it just gets created. And our goal here is our software engineers are directing AI now. They're not manually writing code, hopefully, anymore, right? Very rarely are we going and manually doing any of that, which is pretty amazing. And then we have a lot of checks in place and quality checks within the framework to make sure the things we're putting in hopefully aren't going to break stuff. Does stuff still break sometimes? Sure, right? There are unknowns. But we are continuing to build in those guardrails and those checks to make sure that what we're doing isn't causing an issue. So if you just use generic AI, right, you're not going to catch drifts because you're not checking to see what's changed in our system. It's just going to say, hey, I think this is the right thing to do. If you just use generic AI, it's not going to look for like evidence, right? We have very specific rules about you need to make sure that all the tests that you created when we decided to build this thing are good and that everything has evidence to say that this actually is the right thing to do and that we actually aren't going to break anything, right? We can't just say, yeah, I think it looks okay. That's not a thing. Generic AI isn't going to enforce, the flow metrics and the, rules that we're putting in place. With a framework, we can enforce those things. And then it's not gonna, like, if you're just generically using Claude and you don't have the integrations built into it for your data and things like that, it's not going to be able to do what I'm doing. The way we work, just to give you a little background, is we have pods, right? It's usually like a product manager and then one or more engineers, and they work with the framework, right, to make sure we have good quality. And then AI is doing the work, and they are directing AI to make sure it's doing the right kind of work and telling it if the things it's thinking are right or not. So that's just a little background on a framework and kind of how we're doing things. So how does Kanban integrate into the framework? So what I really like to think about this as is an iceberg, right? We have the things that we see with our eyes sort of above the waterline, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that is below the waterline for us that has to be created within our framework in order to make the things that we're showing people valuable and legitimate. So like above the waterline, we have a playbook that anybody can access and look at, and it's beautiful and pretty and, on a website. And we also have, commands that we're putting. Remember, I talked about commands and prompts and conversations, and then dashboards, right? That we are feeding to our senior leaders, right? Or to the rest of the organization so they can see where their work is. We're really trying to create that above the waterline that makes it easy for everybody to access whatever they need to understand, but also incorporate Kanban, flow metrics, just those ideas in what they're seeing, right? Before we put this in place, it was, I'm going to go to Jira. Oh, I'm going to go talk to a person. I'm going to look in Slack. Now we're having like hopefully a one-stop shop for people to go and see all of those things with the right interpretation, right? Because getting that language in front of people is hard. So I think that this hopefully is useful. Below that waterline, right, we have embedded logic. We have custom rules. We have custom math. We have, things that guide what people can do within like that guide the dashboard creation, all of that sort of stuff. We also have guardrails in place that say, here's what you can and can't do. Like somebody can't go in and say, hey, what's the average cycle time so I can tell somebody how long this is going to take. That is an absolute no-no, and that is built in our system. So nobody can ask Claude that question. Claude will respond, hey, here's your percentile, and give you an SLE instead, which is awesome. And then the other thing below the waterline is, we don't just build our own tools. We rely heavily on Lighthouse, so call out Benji and Lighthouse. We really love it. Claude feeds directly to Lighthouse, and it pulls our flow metrics and our forecasting directly from there. And, I can talk back and forth with Claude about what's going on with our data and use Lighthouse's skill. And it's a really nice integration. Not many people, I'm probably the only person at the organization that actually goes into Lighthouse to look for stuff. We feed all that information back into the, Claude, into the framework, into Claude, so that when people are asking those questions, it gets the right information. Okay, so what have I created? I'm gonna fly through this, just looking at the time for you all, just so that you can see what we've created. So this is actually what I talked about. This is an above the water line item. This is the place that everybody can go and see, here's how we're doing workflow management. And we pull in all of our Kanban teachings. We talk about what's the board should look like. We have expectations. So we're a little bit more deterministic about how we're doing things. We're saying these are the things that we've agreed to when we're using our Kanban board. That is all built into our system. The nice thing about this is people can go look at a really nice HTML version of this, but all the information that lives on workflow management actually lives within our Claude framework, right? Within the Agentic framework that we have in place in a file. So anything that we do hits information about how do we do workflow management and what should people do. So it should catch them if they're doing anything here that we've said we shouldn't do. And it will tell them, hey, we don't do that, or hey, you should be doing this instead. Hopefully it catches those things. So I know I'm scrolling through fast, but this is not the interesting thing. The interesting things that we've created are some of the commands and skills that we've created. So one really difficult thing that I find, right, is the expectation that everybody that I encounter in an organization should have the same ability to go ahead and look at a dashboard, look at their Kanban board, and understand exactly what they're seeing. I have yet to go into an organization where when I leave, I feel like people could go in and look at their board and say, oh, I see work, I see flow, and I can know exactly what I'm supposed to do with it, right? Most people don't spend the time that we do, or, PKTs do, to understand what's going on and see all of these nuances. So we created a skill this is a command, sorry, not a skill. See, even I get them confused. We've created a command that they can run every day when they have their daily review of flow conversation. And it looks for aging signals. It looks for the way we're distributing our work across our columns. It looks for opportunities to pull work. And it also will give them a nudge on if they need to do a retrospective. We don't schedule a retro. We basically trigger a retrospective conversation. So when they go in, I just had it run it so that we didn't have to spend the time to run it, but they get this output within a Claude session, right? So it'll tell them, hey, here's your WIP limit. You have 8 in flight right now. You're over your limit. Also, here's our SLE. Then it throws alerts based on what's going on with those things. So we have red, orange, yellow alerts to say, hey, these are really old, or there's something really wrong with these. We've passed a percentile line. And it gives them information that they should focus on. So if it's blocked, we really see that. If it's stale, meaning it's sat in a column for a long time, we see that thing. And then if there are healthy items, great. Right? This really speaks to the idea that when you go to your daily review of flow, we don't need to talk about every item on our board. If something's acting normally, great. Like, we don't need to spend a whole lot of time talking about it. But if there is an issue with the flow, we should really dig into that. And what do we need to do today with it? It gives, like I said, column distributions. It tells them, hey, there's a pile up here. Hey, this column is starved. Hey, we should pull work from here. You don't have items ready for us to pull. Maybe we need to, figure out what the next most important thing is to grab. Lots of different options there on what might come up in our pull signals. It also recognizes, hey, there's a whole bunch of work that's, concentrated on one individual on the team as opposed to being spread across. Is that something we should pay attention to? Notice that it's really just giving you signals. There are signals to create a conversation. 5 items in flight assigned to a single assignee. Maybe that's not a big deal, because guess what? Actually, people are pairing up on each one of those 5 items. It's just that the system makes us assign it to one person. Totally fine. But it made them have a conversation, and that's the goal. And then it also uses the Lighthouse tool or skill to go and look at, our historical data out in Lighthouse to see, hey, should we trigger a retrospective? Is something weird shifting in our historical data that means that we should have a deeper conversation about something? And it gives the, output here to say, hey, here's the thing I'm seeing, go have the retro. Right? And then it looks to see if we actually have run the flow retro command or not. And if we have, then it's going to lightly remind you every day to make sure that you actually have the retro. But if we haven't, it's going to give you a really strong signal every day to say, you need to go do this thing. So that's the flow review that we do every day for each pod. If we do a flow retrospective, it's really about, I had to ask very specific questions of the Lighthouse skill and then bring back the information and render that report here. So we're looking at throughput trends, the percentile changes. We're looking at our cycle time scatter plot and what's going on there, and then any outliers or things of that nature. So when we run that, we get information about our throughput trends per week. It shows, hey, this week is way different. This week I had a team, we ran it, and it was like, hey, you did 33 items last week, which is like twice as many items as you did all these other weeks. What's going on? It was a good signal for us to have a conversation. It also tells you, hey, you have your SLE set at this. I think that's a cool feature in Lighthouse. We can tell it what we've set our SLE at, and then it checks that, and it says, hey, guess what? Your 85th percentile has changed now. Do you want to change your SLE? And so that gives us that signal here, which is pretty fun. I've rendered the scatter plot in here. Our goal is to really not have to leave our Claude session. So the things that we want to do, we need to pull in here, right, and be able to see them. So we can see our scatter plot here. We can see our percentile profile week by week. Is anything weird going on? Any outliers that have aged over significantly, we can talk about each one of those. And then it gives you an interpretation and suggested actions. Again, these are things that we talk about. It's not what we do for sure. It's, hey, is this right? Is this not right? Maybe we go back and teach it something to say, hey, you assumed this about our data. That's not actually what's going on. And then it can store that back in its knowledge so that we don't assume it that way again. So those are the commands that we're running right now. The goal in the future is to have this all a little bit less human instigated, and have some of these things run as like, pervasive things across the board when we're doing our work. It should shout out to us, hey, you're pulling in work and that's going to take us over our WIP limit. Or, hey, you have some things aging on your board. Are you sure you want to start new work? So that's coming in the future. But this is what we have right now, after only, doing this for a few months. So the other above the waterline thing that we're seeing here is what I've called the tech hub. So I've built out basically the one-stop shop for anybody to go to see our information. What are we delivering? How are we delivering? What are our flow metrics looking like? And I'm hoping that if this is the one-stop shop that they're going into to look at, that they will start speaking the language, right? It's training, a little bit of training throughout the organization, but also seeing it and being spoken this way, makes a big difference. So on our homepage, we literally give every pod's service level expectation and their forecast for the next 7 days. How many items could we potentially complete at an 85% confidence? Anybody can come in and see this and understand what's going on. Anybody can come to the homepage just at a quick glance and see, here's our strategic initiatives, here's our portfolio Kanban board and what's going on across the board. And they can see, here's how our work looks. We can see completed in the last 30 days, here's the distribution of work. And we can also see in progress right now, what's our distribution of work. So, and that's just the homepage. It gives a really nice glance, but also incorporates, flow metrics and what people can expect. Every team gets their own page, which dives in deeper, but it also shows their Kanban board, right? And shows what's going on. It gives, their work item age in every column. So any person in the organization can come here and look and understand, whoa, my thing just started. Oh man, but it's been in progress for 5 days. Maybe I should ask somebody about it. They can understand potentially, this thing's in progress. Maybe it's going to be, one of the 9 items they complete this week. It also gives them just a little bit of information about our delivery metrics in general. How do we get a service level expectation, and what is that service level expectation? How are we getting that forecast for how many items we can get completed? And then we're continuing to develop our notes to our customer section so that Claude can just go in and see, here are the things that were done. Here's the value it's delivered, and we can just automatically drop all that information here on their team. I think the real crowning achievement, though, is our steering page. So every week we sit down with our executive leaders and talk about our strategic delivery, our portfolio. What are we doing? And so we are actually showing them, right, here's our per epic forecast, and what's the probability that we're going to complete it by that date that we originally said we were going to complete it by, and how is that shifting. So we're talking about that every day. We give them signals about things that they're doing, like if it's blocked, because they should know and they should help us remove those blockers, or if they're pushing us to work on something that hasn't been approved to be started yet. All of those things just completely immediately show here on our steering signals. That same work and flow board shows here our work breakdown, and then we do throughput forecasting. This is not perfect. This is a change that we're doing, but we're talking about, in the next 30 days, in the next quarter, what's that forecast? How many items are we going to complete? And if we continue working the way we're working with the mix that we have, this is potentially what you're going to deliver. Is this really what you want us to do? Right? Is this really the decisions you want to make? Do you really want us to work on stuff that's not related to our OKRs? So I think it's hopefully a good tool for them to think about, what decisions should we make from the executive leadership level, and what impact are those decisions having on the organization. We also just show off our OKRs, and they can kind of see if those are in progress and what's going on. I'm not going to go in too much detail with the comparison. That was just really thinking about between what I've done and what James has done. How do you compare those? And just the TLDR version of that is it's obvious we both have come from the same school of thought, because we at the same time have created very similar things with the same sort of thought process underneath of it, as far as Kanban and the things we need to focus on. And I think that just really speaks to, honestly, how good all of our PKTs are, but also just that if it's working for him and it works for me in a different sized organization, that maybe this really works for anybody. So I think that's all I have. I know we've got about 5 minutes for questions. I haven't been.
If anyone has any questions here for Liz, I know, Liz, you covered a lot here, and I think really exciting stuff. I mean, I think one of the things we all struggle with in organizations is how to make sense of the data. Like you said, like what are the signals that I need to pay attention to? And I love that you just bubbled those up and said, you don't even need to look at the board if you don't want to or have to. We'll just extract those signals and make sense of that data for you and bubble that up to the top. We talk a lot about portfolio Kanban and getting leaders in front of a portfolio board and having them discuss the work and all the things that you're talking about here, but you're rarely going to get your C-suite to log into Jira and look at a board full of epics. So I think what you did here is brilliant, because it's a really great way to get their attention quickly and help them see where the things are that need their action right away. So awesome job. Does anybody have any questions for Liz here in our last couple minutes about what she's built and how she's using it with her client?
I know I really went through it fast, so just for time, but if anybody has any questions, just let me.
You've got one here.
Oh, yeah, I use Claude to build all the dashboards. I legit, I've never built a website before. And so I went to Claude and I said, Claude, I need to put all this information on a page, right? And I started out with, I want every team to have their own page so it shows their delivery. And here's what I want. And I made sure it was connected, and it spun up what it looked like. And I said, well, I don't want it to look like that. I changed the colors. I did all of that stuff. But Claude did all the coding, and then we just host it internally as an internal website.
Liz, was there any data that you couldn't get out of Jira, or that you struggled to get out of Jira or Lighthouse, either one, that you had to manually or do the calculations on the Claude side rather than pull that straight from the tooling?
So I think the only thing that we calculate on the Claude side is that age in column. So somebody built a skill, I want to say, that will calculate that. And so then just to get the stale metric, which somebody built, I didn't build that one. Somebody else built it because they were interested in how long it was sitting in a column. And I was like, that's amazing. Anyway, I think that's the only thing. Otherwise, it was really, we pull our work item age from Lighthouse, and we built I had Claude build the way to display it in Jira. All that Monte Carlo forecasting. I built a Monte Carlo forecast as I was trying to figure out what to do. But man, do I prefer the math to be done by an expert. I understand how the math goes, but it gets complex, right? That's been the struggle, is the complexity of doing portfolio forecasting. And I'm like, do I really trust what I've created, or do I trust what somebody else who has spent a long time figuring it out has created? And yeah, my thing matches within reason. And I'm like, okay, but at the end of the day, I don't need to build that when I have a tool that actually does it very well.
Some notes here too from Don. Love your technology hub. Nice and engaging. That's great. Well, I'll bring James back here as well. I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. This will be posted to the prokanban.org YouTube channel. So if you learned something here today that you'd like to share with anybody or would like to access any of the links or documents that were shared in the chat here, we'll post those to the YouTube channel notes as well. Huge thank you to James and Liz for sharing all of this today. Where can people find both of you? James, what's the best way to get in touch?
LinkedIn.
Awesome. All right.
Short,
And Liz?
sweet, right here.
Yeah, LinkedIn is totally fine for me. Send me a message, send me questions. Happy to engage.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. And thanks everybody for joining us today. Please stay in touch.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.